Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. Boy, do we got a lot to talk about with this Penn State Notre Dame game. Notre Dame ends up winning the game 27-24, game-winning field goal at the end. I was taking notes for this game because I have a few different kind of segments I want to do in recapping this game, and my notes kept changing the entire time because I was like, oh, well, Penn State's about to win the game. And so I was doing notes for that. And then Notre Dame's about to win the game. So I was doing notes for that. And then it's kind of went back and forth and back and forth. So I'm going to do my best with my notes tonight. But thank goodness I have Zack Guggenheim here with me to talk about it all. When I have nothing else to say, he can come in and start saying something. Zack, how you doing tonight?
So I'll just start with this. At about every pivotal moment tonight, our stream stopped, and it was so we're like, and I was with a bunch of people, mostly Penn State fans that I work with, and we were just like, no, and then so we catch up, and then oh, it's okay, it's okay. Drew Allar threw a pick. Oh my gosh! So it was a little crazy, but I know what happened. I think
Yeah.
so, but no, we got through it, but yeah, it was a really good game. Obviously sad for the Penn State faithful. I think lots to talk about with Big Game James and Drew Allar and some of the criticisms that people have levied against them, especially the way that game ended. But I think overall, my takeaways, it was a great game.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a number of things we want to get to tonight. So I think I have five things written down that I want us to cover. Number one, I want us to just give our general takeaways. Penn State falling to Notre Dame. What does this mean for Penn State? What does this mean for Notre Dame? I have three critical mistakes that I felt like Penn State made in this game that led to the loss for Penn State. And then I have three super important decisions that I felt like Marcus Freeman made late in this game that really won the game for them. Obviously, players playing, they win the game, stuff like that. But I want to get into those three decisions that I felt like Marcus Freeman made that won the game for him. And then I want to get into talking about the refs. Did the refs decide this game at all? And then finally, Zack will finish it up with James Franklin's legacy. What does this mean for James Franklin? Does this, tarnish his legacy? Is what he did this season good for his legacy? We'll kind of get into all of that. But first, I just want to get your takeaways. Obviously, like you said, great game, heartbreaker for Penn State. Just absolutely, if you're a Penn State fan, you are just on your knees right now, head in the ground, tear in your eye at this moment because it was right there. It was right there for Penn State. And Drew Allar throws across his body, the middle of the field, late. What are your takeaways, Zack?
Well, I think it'd be easy to kind of pile on Drew Allar. It was a terrible decision. You
Yeah,
can't make that throw. You can't. Um, I mean, you got to just eat it at that point. I know you want to try to get points, but it's like, hey, let's live to play for overtime at that point. Um, but I think all that being said, I think it confirms that Notre Dame is a really good team, and so is Penn State. Like I thought both these teams were better than Georgia. And I
yeah,
think I think if you're a Penn State fan and I totally understand that you're thinking, "Ah, we blew it. Yes. But also like understand like this Notre Dame team is legit. And I think Riley Leonard bounced back. Like he threw two back-breaking interceptions, which were also mistakes. And I didn't think Marcus Freeman coached very well in the first half. And he made some big-time adjustments and won that game. And I think that's more my takeaway than Penn State blew it. Um, that's not to say that Penn State doesn't have to look in the mirror. And I think particularly Drew Allar and Andy Kotelnicki, and even Tom Allen, I thought some of the defensive calls were not great. But at the end of the day, they did enough to win this game. And the reality is, if not for that pick, I actually think Penn State goes on to win it. But I think you got to give credit to Marcus Freeman. You got to give credit to Notre Dame. And what a run Notre Dame is on right now. Wins
yeah,
against Indiana, Georgia, Penn State, all within a 2.5 all within a 3-week time frame. I think you got to give a lot of credit to the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway with that moment there at the end and what you were talking about with Drew Allar and the decision making was it felt like Drew Allar was playing that situation like they were down 17-24.
Yeah,
Right? 50
yeah, that's
seconds
a
left
good
on the
point.
clock. And Drew Allar is out there trying to get yards when, like you said, he could have just ate it. He could have just thrown the ball away, live another down. And Penn State had enough of a downfield throwing game in this one that they could have thrown the ball downfield more. But instead, Drew Allar panics and he throws the ball late over the middle as if he is trying to win the game for the team because they're down. When in reality, they're tied. And I know the second half wasn't going the way Penn State wanted to go, but I'm a firm believer that you get into overtime, the best team wins. And I know Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame had, a really good season and they were really hot and everything, but I still come away from this one thinking Penn State was the better team. Penn State just gave this one away, in my opinion. And I'll get into that more of that in my critical mistakes, but like you watch this game, Penn State's pass rush was getting to Riley Leonard. Riley
Yeah.
Leonard wasn't able to throw the ball down the field unless they're not all of them. Some of them were just really good plays by the receivers as well, but a couple of them were more mistakes by Penn State. And I'm not trying to take away anything from Notre Dame here. I'm just using these as points to say if I was James Franklin, I would have been perfectly fine with going into overtime. I would have said, Drew, you go out there, and if you take a sack, you take a sack. You don't turn that ball over.
Yeah.
You don't throw an interception. Because if we go to overtime, we're still going to win this game because we're the better team. Do you agree or disagree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think one thing that you're hitting on, JR, and I think this has been true of Penn State, has been they, under James Franklin, and I think PSU Jim mentioned this too, or something to this point, I feel like their situational awareness is consistently baffling to me.
Yes.
And I think so. Even someone mentioned the DB falling down on the long touchdown to Jaden Greathouse. I'm like, man, I know that there was safety help back. I remember when I first saw it, I'm like, why is there no safety help? There was. The guy fell down, but I'm like, that coverage when you're playing from a lead just felt baffling. Like, why not play more zone? Why are you playing more bump and run? Especially like keep everything in front of you when you have the lead in the fourth quarter. I didn't like that play call defensively. I thought some of the offensive play calling when Drew Allar didn't have it early didn't make sense. I thought some of the defense, like early in the second half, they were calling a bunch of blitzes and Notre Dame's running right by them with draws. And I'm like, man, just play smart. And I think that's the thing. Like, this is, I think, the takeaway I have for Marcus Freeman the past 2 weeks. He is an expert at exploiting your weakness. He is so good at it, at anticipating you being over aggressive or you not being smart. And I think that's his superpower as a coach. Like, I really think that's a superpower, but I think it then magnifies the weakness of James Franklin. And I'll be honest, as a Buckeye, if Ohio State would advance, that would be my concern for Ryan Day as well. Because I think Ryan Day
Marcus
at times,
Freeman? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Do you think Marcus Freeman is the best coach out of these four that were left? Obviously, James Franklin no longer left, but let's just rewind a half hour. Of these four coaches left, do you think Marcus Freeman is the best coach? Because of that ability to out-coach and magnify weaknesses of the other coach and take advantage of their deficiencies, do you think that makes him? Obviously, there's so much more into coaching, recruiting, talent, develop all those other things. But at least let's talk about in-game coaching. In-game coaching. Do you think Marcus Freeman is the best in-game coach of the four that were left in the playoffs?
I think this season he showcased it. And people will bring up, well, he only had 10 men on the field against Ohio State, and he lost to NIU. Yes, but remember, this is his third year as a head coach, and I think the thing that has set him apart from a lot of other head coaches, he learns very quickly from his mistakes. And I think that's something I really appreciate. He has a lot of humility. He's really built a healthy culture. And then in game, I think he's made a lot of smart decisions. I think we said this the last time, but he's very Tressel-esque in his approach. And so he lets you make mistakes and then he capitalizes on them. And so, yeah, I think in terms of in-game ability right now, he is the best coach. And that includes Sark and Day in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I see all you guys' comments. We'll get to comments in just a second. I appreciate everybody that's in the chat. I appreciate all of you being here. Definitely want to get to those. I just really want to finish this Marcus Freeman conversation really quick, and then we'll get into what you guys are saying. I totally agree. I think Marcus Freeman is basically what Jim Tressel was, but he still has a hint of aggression to him. Because you saw what should have been the last drive before the drive where Drew Allar threw the interception. They were dropping back to pass. I felt like in that one, they should have been running the ball. They had 3 timeouts. They had 2.5 minutes left. And instead, Riley Leonard gets sacked twice. Now, thankfully, the hands in the face, got rid of one of those. But Riley Leonard gets sacked twice there. And you see a situation where Notre Dame can't move the ball even 10 more yards. But then they come back the second time around, and Marcus Freeman says, I'm not making this mistake again. We got 30 seconds left. I got 3 timeouts. We're running this ball. Yeah. And we're going to run it straight through Penn State. We're going to run it straight up the middle, and we're not going to let Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton try to get to Riley Leonard. So they run the ball, one time with Jeremiah Love, and I think 3 times with Riley Leonard. I think that speaks to what you're talking about with him learning from his mistakes. He saw in that moment, I got a second chance here. Penn State gifted it to me, and I'm not going to lose it this time. I'm going to get in field goal range. I'm going to do what this offense does best, and if my offense coordinator wants to throw the ball, screw him. Tell him to run the ball. Sometimes as a head coach, you got to say, screw you, buddy. Run the ball.
It's like
I don't think that's exactly what Marcus Freeman said, but in my mind, that's what he said.
It's like you've been in a couple huddles before, I think.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Any comment on that, Zach, before we get to other people's comments?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. Okay. He is. Yeah, I think we're in agreement. I think he is the best. I think he's the best coach, and I thought he outcoached it, especially in that last minute. He did a great job. Which
was the most important time to outcoach James Franklin. So.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. I am going to get to you guys' comments. Philip says, I go to John really fast first. John says, fun, but not surprising. Fact tonight, 0 wide receivers caught the ball tonight for Penn State. 0. And he is correct. If you look at it, Tyler Warren, 6 catches. Nick Singleton, 2 catches. Dinkins, is that a tight end? I believe
that's a tight end. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 catches. Reynolds 1 catch. Kaytron Allen 1 catch. Wow. Philip says Kotonicki had no confidence that Allar throw the ball downfield, not to anybody but Tyler Warren. That's for sure. He didn't have. I don't know. I mean, this is to me. This is the conversation. I was talking to somebody about this a little bit during it. Is it the fact that he doesn't have trust in Drew Allar, or does he not trust his receivers to get open downfield? The only one he trusts is Tyler Warren.
Well, there were definitely some spots. I'll just say that this was Drew Allar's worst game this season. And I think it was significant. But I think we had seen elements of that in the first couple playoff games too. I think he just didn't get exposed like he did tonight. And I mean, one of my negative plays, it's actually back in the first half. He had, I think, Singleton wide open down the sideline of the field. And he hits him, and it's at least a 30-yard gain.
Yeah.
If not a touchdown. Like he had, room to move, and he just overthrows him. And I think that epitomized Drew Allar tonight, is he was so off. And think about it. If he actually hits half the passes he missed, right? I think he was 4 of 12 in the
Hmm.
first half, something like that. If he's 8 for 12, Penn State's probably going into half with a 14-3, 17-3 lead. And instead
Yeah.
it's 10-3. So I think that I don't know if it's that he didn't trust Allar down the field. I think it's more that Allar was not productive tonight in the ways that he needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some passes downfield that Aller just should have hit. I mean, he was clean enough in the pocket. The receiver was there, and he just overthrew him or he missed him. Even the
Mm-hmm.
final pitch, he overthrows Nick Singleton.
Yeah, yeah.
I know it's kind of a joke, but PSU Jim says terrible loss by Penn State again, similar to the Boise State game. Stopped running the ball when it was working. Notre Dame could not stop Singleton. Most will blame Aller for the end. Yeah, a lot of people are going to blame Aller, and that is the biggest talking point. I have other critical mistakes that don't center around Aller for me, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the biggest parts there. You have any thoughts on running the ball there for Penn State, Zach?
Well, it's hard because, and you saw it in the third quarter that the run game did get bogged down. I think though the issue isn't. I agree that they should have run it more, but I think what they needed to do, and I think it's combines with Drew Allar, is they needed to be more creative in getting easy pass plays to then loosen up the defensive line, the defense again, so that they could continue to run. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like their drive in the fourth quarter where they had the throwback, that should have happened in the third quarter. Like those plays should have happened earlier to get easy pass yards to free up the running backs. I thought, again, and this has been a criticism we've had of Kotelnicki, I felt like at times they were too cute or too stagnant in their pass concepts. And because of that, it took them a while to loosen up what was going on in the run game.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree for sure. I think also in that first half, you were getting so much push with your offensive line. It wasn't just Nick Singleton being able to run on
Yeah.
them. It was just the amount of push you were getting in that offensive line. I want to see if I can find the rush attempts in the second half because yeah, Penn State had 16 rush attempts in the second half to their 26 rush attempts in the first half. Now, granted, in the first half they were running 5.4 yards per carry. In the second half they were running 3.9. But I mean,
Yeah.
I don't.
Do you know what? Do you know what caused Notre Dame to be able to shore up on the defensive side? Because I saw them moving the line in the first half, and I'm like, oh, Penn State's going to win this game. And then all of a sudden, it felt like on both sides of the ball, Notre Dame was the more physical team.
Honestly, I think so. I was talking to somebody about this during the game and how, Penn State was just able to move Notre Dame's defensive line so much, and it really started to show how much Notre Dame's weakness of the size on the defensive line was there. And I was talking about how I was surprised Georgia didn't do this in their game. And then I was reflecting on it and saying, oh, yeah, Notre Dame's defensive line was just being more athletic. They were getting around blocks better. Even though Penn State was trying to leverage and use their strength against Notre Dame, they were still able to evade those blocks and get into the backfield. I felt like Notre
Mm,
Dame did a better job of evading those blocks. Again, they weren't trying to push Penn State over. They were just trying to not get blocked, and which I know is a super simple way to say it, but I think you watch the second half, I think you see the Notre Dame defensive line rely more on their athleticism rather than just we're going to try to push you and you're pushing us because it wasn't working for them. So, yeah.
gotcha.
All right, couple more comments and then we'll get to our other stuff. Jeff says, I think Drew Allar had a terrible game. If he has a good game, PSU wins fairly easily. And this is just a totally different conversation about Freeman for sure and somewhat for Franklin. He then went on to say Allar's interception at the end was terrible, but he wasn't good throughout the game. The first missed pass to Singleton is an easy throw. Should have been 7-0. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Aller had good parts of this game. I think he hit Tyler Warren on some good passes. I think obviously, you can tell he is the most comfortable throwing to Tyler Warren. I think there were a few times when he was under pressure, he was able to get the ball out, evade the sack. So, I'm not going to say Drew Allar was terrible in this game, but there were definitely passes that he missed. And you could make the argument, like PSU Jim was saying, those were passes he never should have been throwing because they should have been running the ball more. I think it's a very interesting thing to talk about, but I don't know, Zach. I mean, obviously he had the interception at the end, so everybody's going to blame Drew Allar for that. But I mean, just looking at the totality of the game, like, is Drew Allar the one to blame for this loss, in your opinion? Or, and then we'll use this to get into my critical mistakes.
I don't think he's the only one, but I think you do, like, he threw the interception, and if he hits some of those throws that he missed, someone brought up the Singleton drop. That's on Allar, in my opinion, because that was not a good, accurate ball. It was behind, hit him in the knee. That's got to be out in front, and it wasn't. If it's out in front, it's a touchdown. Instead, at the very least, even if he catches it, he's getting stopped at the 2-yard line. It was an inaccurate ball, and I think all night that was for the most part, my frustration with Allar is he was inaccurate. And so I don't think he's the only reason why they lost. I think there was quite a bit of mismanagement in this game, but I do think he is a major factor as to why they lost tonight.
Yeah. I'm going to get into my 3 critical mistakes of why I believe Penn State lost this game. So critical mistake number 1 of why I believe Penn State lost this game is the third quarter and the fourth quarter offensive meltdown. We can talk about Drew Allar all we want. We can talk about bad running plays all we want. We can talk about all that stuff. The fact of the matter is, in the third and fourth quarter, Penn State averaged 5.6 yards per play, and that was to Notre Dame in the first quarter, or in the first half, was averaging 3.9. Notre Dame in the second half was averaging 6.2. Penn State, their offense did not improve with Notre Dame's offense. You saw Notre Dame be able to start running the ball. You saw Notre Dame be able to start picking up yardage in the second half that they weren't able to pick up in the first half. That never happened for Penn State. Penn State in the third quarter had only 25 total yards because they had -3 rushing yards on only 7 plays. When you only have 4 minutes of possession time in the third quarter to 11 minutes for Notre Dame, thankfully Notre Dame only scored 7 points on them, but that could have got real ugly real fast with how Penn State just completely lost the third quarter and then started losing in the fourth quarter as well. My other one is Penn State lost the middle 8 in this game. In those last 4 minutes of the first half and in the first 4 minutes of the second half, I believe that is where the game really started to change, because you saw Penn State get that touchdown. Penn State had confidence. Penn State was rolling at that point. I believe it was 10-0. And then on that next drive, Notre Dame is able to go down the field and with only 2 minutes get a field goal. Then they get the ball right at the beginning of the next half, and they go 8 plays, 75 yards, and they get themselves a touchdown. They just went right down the field on Penn State. It was just, knife through butter at that point. And losing that middle 8, I felt like set the tone for the entire rest of the game. And then finally, my critical mistake number 3, I feel like Penn State gave this game away in the fourth quarter. Cam Miller falling down. Just as I was telling my wife, she didn't really care, but just as I was telling my wife, I was like, Notre Dame needs a big play here. She didn't really care. She was just listening to me and being nice. But I said, Notre Dame needs a big play on this drive. Like, they are going to have to get a big play in order to win this game. Right after I said that, Cam Miller falls down, and Riley Leonard throws the pass out to Grayhouse, and he's able to juke. I believe it was Jalen Reed, one of the safeties. I forget if it was Jalen Reed or the other one. He's able to juke him out. He falls down, 50-some yard touchdown pass for Riley Leonard. Nicholas Singleton's false start on that very next drive, because you look at it, that led
Yep.
to a 3-and-out. That next play, they got 10 yards. That would have been a first down. But instead, they get those 10 yards. They get stuffed on the run play, and then Drew Allar tries to scramble, tries to make a play, and then he gets stuffed as well. You go 3-and-out in that situation. You give the ball right back to Notre Dame. The hands of the face call that wiped out the sack. It was unnecessary. He was getting blocked. It was completely unnecessary. I forget which defensive lineman it was, but that was completely unnecessary.
It was Durant. Zane Durant.
Okay. Oh yeah, it was Durant. Abdul Carter made a great play on that one. That would have backed Notre Dame even further back, and you would have possibly been in a situation where they wouldn't have been able to pin you as deep as they did, and possibly you get the ball a little bit quicker because Notre Dame is trying to maybe save time. I don't know what would happen there, but Drew Allar might not have thrown that last interception if that sack had counted. And then finally, there at the end, the management of, trying to win the game there, not just being content with, we know we're the better team, so we're content with a tie and going into overtime. Drew Allar pressured himself in that moment, tried to make a hero play, tried to throw across his body in the middle of the field late, and it didn't work out for him. And those are the four mistakes those are the three mistakes, and then those are the four areas where I felt like Penn State just gave the game away. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right on. I'll throw in another play, and it was a play call. So after the Singleton false start, you had a 3rd and 3, and Greg McElroy on the broadcast said this is the time you get the ball to your tight end Tyler Warren. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, they're going to defend him, like they're going to find a way to defend him. And granted, he was held on that play. It should have been a penalty. There was also an offsides on that play. They didn't see that. But if I'm Andy Kotelnicki, you've got to have some sort of outlet if he's covered. And instead, it was a little bit of a roll. I don't know if he rolled out because he felt pressure or what, but it seemed like he was almost the only option on that play. And it was just a terrible decision. Like, you've got to have options. And the fact that they went 3-and-out after they got a stop at 24-24, even though Notre Dame didn't score on the next drive, it sucked all the life out of Penn State, because it was like you went from having a chance to drive the ball down the field to just giving the ball back.
Left.
And just that, yeah, like
they had 5 minutes left.
If they run the ball and are able to run the ball, they could have just had one drive to win it. I think that's the most frustrating thing, and I think that's the biggest failure is the false start combined with a 3rd and 3 play call. I thought those were both, just terrible, terrible mistakes.
Yeah, and everybody knew it was going to Tyler Warren on that play. I mean, everybody knew Tyler Warren went in motion. And I was sitting there and just thinking to myself, Tyler Warren's going to run an out route. That's what they're going to do. They're going to run those receivers off.
Yep.
Drew Allar's not even going to look at the receivers. Tyler Warren's going to throw an out route, and that's what he's going to look for. And lo and behold, that's what they did. And I mean, Notre Dame knew it. You're right. There was offsides and there was some holding on that play, but you got to play through it. So Penn State goes from having the ball with 5 minutes left, game tied, to going 3-and-out. And giving Notre Dame the ball back with 2.5 minutes left in the game. And Notre Dame starts that next drive on, what was it? The 25? I forget where they started it from. No, the 20. They started.
Yeah, it was the 25. It was 25 or 20.
Yeah, they punt the ball down there, and Notre Dame gets the ball with 25, and they go 6 plays, 28 yards, punt. Drew Allar throws the interception. They need 7 plays, 19 yards, milk the clock, 7 seconds left. They kick the field goal. Game over. So, yeah, I mean, it just – I'm not trying to take anything away from Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, obviously that interception at the end, that was huge. That won them the game. But I just felt like there were mistakes that Penn State made, losing the middle 8, the 3rd and 4th quarter debacle not just on offense, on defense as well, allowing Notre Dame's defense to start moving the ball like that, and then giving the game away. That Cam Miller falling down. I know Drew Allar is going to eat himself alive, and I know this isn't how football players operate, many of them, but that Cam Miller falling down was just as impactful, if not more, than the Drew Allar interception, I think. And the hands to the face. And the Nicholas Singleton false start. I mean, they all added to it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for as many.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as many good plays as Penn State made, there were a lot of negative plays too. Yeah. And I think that's what you're illustrating. And I think it's just helpful to point that out.
Yeah. And Notre Dame made a ton of plays too. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, because what we're going to get into next is the 3 decisions that Marcus Freeman made in this game to win them the game. Now, some of these are not like super big coaching decisions. They're more so kind of like vibe and feel, but I think that's a huge part of coaching, especially in these big games. You have to kind of have that vibe and that feel, and you have to be able to trust your players. So number 1, Marcus Freeman trusted his defense out there on the field in that game-winning drive that Penn State could have had a game-winning drive. And Marcus Freeman trusted his defense. Not only did he trust his defense, but he trusted his defense to play defense straight up. It would have been really easy to go into that final drive and say, okay, let's just play prevent defense. It'll take them a little while to get to the 50. And then at the end, when they get to the 50, like, maybe when they get to the 50, they stall out and they can't get a field goal or something like that. Marcus Freeman didn't do that. You could tell, like, they were playing man on those guys. And they were sticking with them. And if they were going to get beat over the top, they were going to get beat over the top, which has happened in that game multiple times. I mean, Penn State had a number of big plays in that game. If you describe big plays as pass plays of 15 yards or more and run plays of 10 yards or more, Penn State had 6 run plays of 10 yards or more and 4 pass plays of 15 yards or more in this game. And so for Marcus Freeman to have the guts to say, we're going to play you straight up, we're not going to play prevent defense on you, is just, I mean, that's just absolutely huge. Obviously it could go the other way, and you could say it was a terrible decision if they got a big play on him, but he trusted his pass rush, he trusted his guys, and then there at the end, he trusted his kicker. Despite the odds, right? They talked about it a bunch of the broadcasts. This was one of the worst, if not the worst, field goal kicking teams in the country in the regular season. Jeter comes into the postseason, kicks way better. Kickers in the college football playoffs this year were 0 for 4 in game-winning field goals. 0 for 4 in game-winning field goals. That's crazy. They're 1 for 5 now because Jeter hit that field goal that Penn State almost blocked, by the way. Could you imagine if they got that block? That'd have been crazy. Do you think there was any other coaching decisions or anything Marcus Freeman made that won them the game?
I think a big one is the fact that Marcus Freeman trusted his backup quarterback at the end of the first half. I think they let him throw. They let him drive the ball down the field and get a field goal. And that gave them a ton of momentum going into the second half. You talked about winning the middle 8. No one's going to remember. I don't remember the backup quarterback's name, but he played a pivotal role in getting the momentum into the half and cutting that lead to a touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah, he played a huge role in that, and it was decision making by the coach to get that to happen. So, I mean, as far as I look at it, like, there were just so many things that Marcus Freeman did in the fourth quarter, decisions that he made, and he was forced to make the decision, right? Like, there's no way that he goes for it on, what was that, 4th and 9 after that sack. Like, there's no way he goes for that in that situation. So I get it, but still, like, I don't know, you could have done something else, but he didn't do it. He trusted his defense, and I think Marcus Freeman deserves a lot of credit because this team dealt with a good amount of deficiencies in the game. The pass rush of Penn State was eating the Notre Dame offensive line alive the entire game. Riley Leonard was struggling to throw the ball. And also the aggression to go with Steve Angeli. It was Caesar Tweezer is bringing it up here, the backup quarterback for Notre Dame. They're at the first half. Zack, I don't know if they win this game if that backup quarterback didn't set them up like he did there at the end of the first half,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean yeah, exactly. Like Marcus Freeman trusted him with the ball to drive them down the field at the end of the first half. I thought that was huge, huge.
And I think that really means something for you to trust your players, not just the players that have been performing for you all season long, but to trust every guy on your team, to trust Jeter after the regular season that he had, to trust the backup quarterback coming in at the end of the first half there to say, dude, we need at least a field goal. Go out there and throw. To trust your defense, play defense straight up on Penn State. I don't have enough nice things to say about Marcus Freeman in this game. After that,
Yep.
so we'll talk about James Franklin in just a second. The next thing I want to get to is the refereeing in this one. Zach, a lot of thoughts on Twitter and everything that the refereeing was pro Penn State. A lot of thoughts that the refereeing was pro Notre Dame. I personally felt like the refereeing was a little bit more pro Notre Dame just because of how much holding there was by the Notre Dame offensive line and how much it wasn't being called. Now, I will say there was holding by the Penn State offensive line that wasn't being called too, but I felt like there was more by the Notre Dame by the Notre Dame offensive line. They did have the pass interference call that went against Notre Dame, which I think was the correct call. So they did have some of that stuff, but like the lack of holding calls, the pass interference call, the hands to the face call that they put on Zane Durant, I felt like that was justified. Them confirming the interception there, that was the diving catch there at the end of the game. I mean, Zach, just overall, do you feel like refereeing played a part in which team won this game, or did you feel like the refereeing was pretty on point today and they stayed out of it when they needed to stay out of it and they got involved when they had to get involved?
Oh man, it's tough because I don't think it was on point, but I'm not sure it was pro any team either. Like I see people in the chat are like, oh, they were so pro Penn State or they were so pro Notre Dame. Listen, there are bad calls on both sides. I think Jeff McMichael and I were talking back and forth on Twitter. He mentioned it was a rough spot to call the pass interference on when he threw to Tyler Warren in triple coverage, which was a terrible decision, by the way.
Right.
And it was a terrible ball. It was late.
Yes.
But at the same time, like it was a textbook call. Now they had been calling defensive holding all night. So to call it there felt a little weird, but it was textbook. So yes, you can get upset that they weren't calling it and then they call it textbook. But I think that's my takeaway. I thought officiating certainly impacted the game, but I'm not sure there was a net positive for either team. I think it was bad calls after bad calls.
Yeah, I mean, like I thought the pass interference call was correct. I felt like the hands in the face call was correct. But my issue was probably more of the missed calls rather than the calls they made more than anything else, right? I pointed out the lack of holding on both sides, but I felt like there was more holding by Notre Dame. And then you pointed out the offsides, the holding on Notre Dame against Tyler Warren that looked like it occurred. But I almost appreciate that they like that's so hard to say, right? Because if you're Notre Dame, you're like, oh, I appreciate that they let the guys play, right? But if you're Penn State, you're like, okay, well, you got to let the guys play, but you also let the other team get away with a cheap foul to basically win them the game because Penn State didn't convert on that third down. So like, I mean, I don't know, like I look at it and I say there wasn't a huge like controversial targeting penalty like there was against Texas and Arizona State. There wasn't a big like push off pass interference penalty like there was Ohio State and Oregon in the regular season. Like there wasn't a big call made at the end of the game. But if you watch that game, you're going to think about but there also wasn't a call made when maybe it should have happened, which I think is probably the thing that's going
Yeah.
to eat at people more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
So, all right. And then, Zach, our last topic. And then if you want to bring anything else up, you certainly can. But I want to have a real honest conversation about James Franklin. So, James Franklin, when he loses this game to Marcus Freeman, you could argue that James Franklin lost the game for him. As I pointed out earlier, I think there was a whole lot more that happened in this game, more than just James Franklin losing the game in the fourth quarter. As a Penn State guy pointed out in the chat, once again, it's happened time and time again now. And then, so he has that happen. But this is also a situation where Penn State had arguably the easiest path to get to the semifinals. Now, I don't really subscribe to this theory. I do think that, you can't say like exactly, I don't know, like I want to give credit to James Franklin for winning playoff games, right? But at the same time, he also faced a group of five team and a team that was group of five last year and had a rather easy ACC schedule to get to the ACC championship game and then wasn't punished when they lost. So, I mean, SMU probably deserved to be in the playoffs, but I could definitely see an argument for an Ole Miss or somebody like that getting in over them. So for me, like I have to acknowledge those things when I'm talking about James Franklin. But at the same time, I can't be one of those people that just says James Franklin, he didn't get any wins in the playoffs, and this does nothing, and he's the same old that we saw before. What are your thoughts?
I think the legacy question is so hard. It's funny. I've been at a conference with our ministry, and a number of them are Penn State fans, and a lot of them are ready to see James Franklin go. And it's because of the manner in which he loses. And I think it's very similar. Again, I think it's very similar to the Ryan Day conversation several weeks ago when he lost to Michigan, which is they want him to be a national championship. They want Penn State to be a national championship contender at least once every 10 to 20 years. And by contender, I mean actually win it. And I think the reality is the ceiling for James Franklin has been in like 6 to 10 range, where you're good, you can be really good, and even sometimes you can upset a top tier team. But in reality, you always tend to come up short, and you kind of come up short in ways where you shoot yourselves in the foot. And I think that's the difficulty with not just that they lost this game, it's the way they lost. And I think you have to balance that, though, with the 12-team world with Penn State. The 12-team playoff world with Penn State is they're going to get in more often than not now. And so James Franklin is going to get in. He's going to get more playoff wins, I think, because he's probably going to play more teams in that 9 to 12 range. And those are the teams that he can beat. I think they have a really good roster coming back next year. They could probably make it far next year. But I think to your point, they're going to beat teams that are group of five or lower rated in the Power Five. And does that actually satisfy what Penn State's looking for? And I don't think so. And so it's just hard because it's like, do you fire somebody? And I think that's the real question. Do you fire James Franklin? Do you fire someone for being in the 10 to 6 range with the possibility to maybe sometime get over the hump? Or do you say, let's start from scratch and then possibly take some time to get back into that 12-team race, which it will take time because the Big Ten's getting better. Like Oregon's not going away. Michigan certainly is not going away. Ohio State's not going away. And then you have other teams who are elevating. Illinois is elevating, right? Minnesota is elevating. You still have to deal with USC and Washington. And so Penn State, if the 12-team world were here and they just had to deal with Michigan and Ohio State, then I think, okay, like let's go out and get somebody. But the problem is in the 12-team world, Franklin can make the playoff probably 4 out of 5 years and probably win a playoff game 2 or 3 out of 5 years. Do you really want to lose that with the possibility? Like, do you want to possibly lose that by getting a new coach and starting from scratch? That, I think that's the big conundrum that Penn State's under right now. But I know for sure that they're tired of this. And I think they should be. Like, I think this was, as much as I hate to say it, like, because I like Drew Allar, I like James Franklin. I think James Franklin gets a bad rap, but as I've said on this show and on my show, at some point you are who you are. And whereas Marcus Freeman has changed, James Franklin really hasn't. His results haven't changed. And I think that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I mean, like with Marcus Freeman, you saw the gradual change, right? You still saw him struggle. Like, what was it? His first year or second year, he loses to Marshall, and you're like, okay, well maybe he can grow from that. Well, this year he loses to Northern Illinois. You're like, okay, well this guy still struggles coming off a big game, beating inferior opponents, but you also saw him take down an Indiana team that looked good all year. I know there's a lot of people that argue they shouldn't have been there, but guess what? They were there, and they won 11 games that season. So he beat that team. Then he goes on and he beats Georgia. Like, I don't think we're having this conversation if Penn State had beaten Indiana and Georgia. I think this conversation comes up because you had James Franklin be so close to beating Ryan Day at home, and then he falls short. He came really close to beating Dan Lanning, and then he falls short. He comes really close to beating Marcus Freeman, and then he falls short. Like, to me, like, James Franklin has been considered a top 10 coach for a while now, but it feels like with every coach that he passes, somebody else passes him. And I think that's where the frustration comes with Penn State fans more than anything else. You're seeing these other coaches improve and get better and be thought of better, but you don't see that as much with James Franklin. It's kind of like he's just sticking at that same 8 or 9 spot, and Dan Lanning passes him up. But who's the guy from Florida State? What's his name?
Norvell.
Norvell goes behind him. Yeah, Norvell. Norvell goes behind him, but Dan Lanning passes him up, right? Somebody else goes behind him, but then you have Marcus Freeman pass him up. Like, I get it. I get why Penn State fans are so annoyed. But at this point, like, this is almost like in the NFL, right? Where you're middle of the pack every year. It's like the Steelers with Mike Tomlin, right? Like, they don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin, but Mike Tomlin also never has losing seasons. So you can't really get rid of the guy, but you also are not confident you're ever going to achieve the mountain with the guy. And that's kind of where James Franklin is at right now. You know James Franklin isn't going to fall off and have a 5-7 or a 7-5 season, right? You know that's not going to happen. But at the same time, you also know if you get to the semifinals, you're not going to the national championship, right? Like, that, to me, that's where that is the hardest part of this conversation. Your ceiling isn't where you want to be, but the floor isn't low enough that it's unacceptable. It's just right in the middle, and he's going to tease you a little bit some years. It's never going to seem like enough. But I think you have to keep him around.
Yeah. And it's hard because I think it's a similar, again, I keep relating it to Ryan Day because we were just talking about it a few weeks ago with Ohio State, Michigan. The difficulty with both of these coaches, and it's going to be, I think if Ryan Day wins tomorrow, it's a moot point, right? But I think the conversation surrounding both coaches is not, hey, are they good coaches? They are. They are. Like James Franklin, I really hate the rhetoric around James Franklin because I think he is a top 10 coach in this industry. And I think he's a darn good coach. I think he's a darn good recruiter. But the problem is, like, if you want to win a national championship, the one thing you have to do is elevate. and he has just not. He has gotten them to a plateau that they've just stayed stagnant. And you even saw it with Kotelnicki. Like, I don't think he knows how to unleash Kotelnicki, but maybe even more so, I think the team takes on his demeanor. And I think you saw some of those nerves tonight with Drew Allar. Like, I think Drew Allar, I think some of the rest of the team, they played nervous. They didn't play up to their ability. And you're like, and I think we've seen evidences of that even the first two playoff games, and those weren't stiff competition, as you alluded to. They were good. Like, I think you got to give credit to Boise, you got to give credit to SMU, but they're not the elite teams that Penn State is craving to beat.
Sorry, I had to cough there. Yeah, no,
Yep.
I agree with you.
FYI, I'm at
What'd you say?
I'm at 10%. I'm at 10% battery, and I think I'm lagging pretty hard. So I
Okay,
apologize.
you're
So
fine.
I might need to
I was
wrap up here.
I was getting ready to wrap it up. So we got some people left in the comments and stuff like that, but I appreciate you guys being here. I was just gonna say one last thing, and then I'll give you the floor to say one last thing, Zach, and then we'll wrap it up from here. I think the biggest thing with James Franklin is what you just said. The craving is always going to be there for more for Penn State fans, and the bigger wins, the more recognition, the championships are always going to be there. But until he delivers on those, you could just never feel completely confident in a James Franklin Penn State team that they're going to give you what you want most. And that's the most infuriating thing of it all. So, final thoughts, Zach, and then we'll get out of here.
I think just my final thought is, let's not, like, we've kind of done. I think we've dumped a little bit on Penn State. Not, I don't think we've unfairly, but I think it is worth saying, like, the beauty of the 12-team playoff is Penn State did make it to the semifinals, and they got beat by a pretty good Notre Dame team. And I think it's just important that we lift up both truths. They underperformed tonight. They should have won. And they had an easy path. But also, they made it to the semifinals. Like, this is their first playoff appearance. And they did pretty well. They could have blown it to Boise State. They could have blown it to SMU, and they didn't. And I think that does deserve credit. And I think if James Franklin is going to turn things around and elevate, this is the way to do it, to make the playoffs, to get to the semifinals, and say, hey, that wasn't good enough. How do we get better so that we make the championship game next year? And so the pattern would suggest that's not going to happen. But, like, let's not neglect the accomplishment of Penn State either.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And that's what I am getting at when I say I think it's fair to say Penn State had an easy path, but it's not fair to say Penn State didn't win a single playoff game, because you have to acknowledge the accomplishment, but at the same time, you can also acknowledge the reality of it all, which is that beating Tennessee and Oregon is much more difficult than beating Boise State and SMU. Beating Indiana and Georgia is more difficult than beating SMU and Boise State. No disrespect to those programs, but it is what it is. I am very excited for the national championship game. If the Buckeyes do not make it, I will be rooting for Marcus Freeman. I really like Marcus Freeman. I know he's said some stuff about Ohio State and how he wishes he went to Notre Dame. Whatever. I think he's just trying to get in good with his new school, which is fine. Whatever. I don't care. He was a great linebacker for Ohio State, and I just really love the way that he coaches. So Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman. If it's you in Texas in the national championship game, I'll be rooting for you. And if it's you and Ohio State in the national championship game, even if Ohio State loses, I'll still be a little happy for Marcus Freeman. So thanks everybody for coming in and being here and listening to me and Zach, and Zach's lagging on the stream. But I think we had a good episode, and we will be back. Well, at least I'll be back. I don't know if Zach will be able to be back tomorrow night to recap the Ohio State and Texas game. Now, the thing with that is I do have to do post game for the Voice of College Football for Ohio State. So I probably won't do an hour-long post game stream, but I might come on and just give some quick thoughts about the game or something like that. So if you guys are up late, if you're on the West Coast and it's only like 9 o'clock for you, then I'll be there. But if not, you can listen to it again in the morning. So thanks, everybody. Check out Zach over at Big Ten Football Talk. He's still putting out episodes every now and then when he has time to. And you can always keep it locked in here at the Big Ten Huddle. Check us out over on podcasts and everything else as well. But please do like and subscribe. We appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow night as we recap Ohio State, Texas. Have a good one.